The city of dreams literally now becoming a city of nightmares. Exactly what's going on with the city of Mumbai? Why is there this feeling that Mumbai appears to have lost or be in the process of losing this battle against corona pandemic? With me, senior Congress leader, former president of the Mumbai Congress, Milind Deora, who's been busy trying to provide relief to people, is with us right now. Milind, thanks very much. First, let me ask you, Milind, why do you think has the situation in Mumbai become so pathetic today?
Bhupen, thank you so much for having me. The situation in Mumbai is not very different from the situation, let's say, in New York City. Essentially, it's fair to say that um, coronavirus hits cities and congested, dense areas the hardest. And in a city like Mumbai, which is India's largest city, where a large percentage of our population, almost 55%, live in slums and a large percent live in congested chawls. Social distancing, um, you know, hygiene, sanitation, these are challenges. So therefore, I think it's hit Mumbai the hardest, like it did in New York City.
I've been looking at pictures, Milind, of you building quarantine centers and you helping the authorities. Exactly how many quarantine centers have you built so far and how many do you still require?
We have built in coordination and conjunction with the BMC and as per their request, um, we are handing them over to start with almost 900 beds for what are called COVID care centers, essentially for asymptomatic patients. We are also building some beds for with oxygen for people with mild cases of COVID who have respiratory issues but not severe cases. And it's hard to say how many more we need, but that is something that the BMC will have to assess. If people are unable to uh, practice social distancing as and when the city opens up, and which will hopefully happen sooner than later, then you will need many more because again in congested areas and localities, especially in slums, when a person tests positive for COVID, it's important to move that person to a quarantine facility outside the slum where social distancing and self isolation is close to impossible. Similarly, when somebody in a slum tests positive for COVID, the neighbors who are might be sharing the same toilet with them, or are live very close to one another. Even though they're not COVID positive, they may need quarantine facilities. So I see a need for a lot of these facilities, but again, that will be based on how quickly the city opens up, how much we're able to practice social distancing, and based on the BMC's feedback. But I am more than happy to partner with many uh, corporates such as the Godrej Group, who helped me build these the first set of quarantine facilities, and many corporates who are more than willing to help use their CSR funds for this noble cause, because everybody, and especially the business community, wants Mumbai to come back to normal as quickly as possible.
Mumbai, Milind, has always been a heavily populated city. Do you think this fight against corona in Mumbai is becoming that much more difficult because of its population pressure? Are things just not going to be the same again?
I think coronavirus has poses a very serious challenge to all cities around the world, especially ones that are extremely dense and congested. And whether it's in New York City, whether it's London, whether it's Mumbai, where people depend heavily on public transport, these cities will face a challenge with the virus. But I'm confident that all cities will learn to live with the virus. They learn to um, commute, work, uh, do everything that they did, but in a far more distanced way from one another. I think that is possible. I think that it's encouraging to see some cities and countries around the world where even restaurants are beginning to open up with social distancing norms. So I think that is something which we'll have to learn to do. And this virus, as we know, of course, is as almost as contagious as a common cold is, but it's far more deadly. So we have to be careful. We have to maybe a restaurant, for instance, will have fewer tables. They'll be separate from one another. Maybe people will be, wearing masks and till the time that the food comes. So I don't know. These are things we'll have to learn and improvise and evolve along the way. But I believe that cities will come back. Certainly in the emerging world and in the developing world, in countries like India, perhaps in Africa, other parts of Asia, Latin America, where a large percentage of the city's population live in slums. In Rio de Janeiro, for example, in Brazil, they're called favelas. In those areas, social distancing becomes a serious challenge, and those cities may take longer than, let's say, New York or London to come back. But I'm sure that eventually we will all have to find a way to live with coronavirus and get back to our normal lives.
What do you think of the nationwide political response, Milind, against Corona? Are politicians, at the end of the day, still only and only trying to score political points?
I actually am quite encouraged by the political response overall, cutting across party lines. I think just the fact that we've seen the visuals of the central government, the prime minister talking to chief ministers of all states, cutting across different parties to coordinate the lockdown, to coordinate other relief issues, to coordinate other healthcare related issues. I think to me is encouraging. Perhaps I'm an optimist, but I think it's encouraging that if that becomes the norm going forward, even after coronavirus, where in the center and the state, the chief ministers and the prime minister can regularly interact virtually, like they do once in a while in Vigyan Bhavan in New Delhi physically. But if they can do this virtually more and more often, I think it augurs very well for center-state relations, for our federalist structure, and is healthy in terms of governance because it will allow for greater cooperation in many, many areas in terms of economic cooperation, um, issues like law and order. And not only is it good for center-state relations, but it will also help state governments coordinate better among themselves. Even states don't talk to each other as much as they should. So, in my opinion, I've been encouraged by it. Yes, politics is but natural. Political parties, politicians will play politics. That is unfortunate. I do believe that we should all put politics aside at this time and do our best to work together. We are united. We must work unitedly. And it's not just until the time that we contain COVID and open up the country. I think even beyond that, the rebuilding process, which will take a few years, requires unity and coordination among all political leaders cutting across parties and all governments.
With all international credit agencies, financial bodies giving India the negative marks, what do you make out of India's economy story in the long run?
I see the future of India economically. I'm encouraged after my conversations with different industries, from B2B industries, B2C industries, um, uh, from the hospitality sector. I think that when we bring coronavirus, there are many industries which are already functioning at 80 to 90% capacity. Um, for example, a company like Unilever is already functioning at almost 90% capacity. But some industries will take a long time to recover. The hospitality sector, tourism sector will take a long time to recover. Real estate may come back a little sooner. The automotive sector, for instance, again will take a long time to recover. So I would say we certainly as a government, state and central need sector-wise support. Industries like real estate, industries like the automotive sector, industries like hospitality, these have, they support many, many ancillary industries. So for instance, when the real estate sector does well, you're helping the construction industry, you're helping the cement industry, you're helping the steel industry. So the government must look at key industries which are job creators, which have a huge impact on the health of banks, and support these industries, give them more relief. But overall, I'm still optimistic that in maybe 12 to 18 months from now, depending on the industry, depending on the sector, you will see the economy and consumer demand, you will see those industries reaching pre-COVID levels. I think that will happen perhaps on its own, regardless of what the government does. But I think if the government is very, very proactive, becomes very pro-business, encourages growth, encourages enterprise, does away with a lot of the regulations that have been plaguing Indian business for a long, long time and making India far more uncompetitive. I think then we can see a major leapfrog in our economic growth, and in some ways even be better than some of our competitors in the ASEAN and Asian region. Because in my opinion, the countries that genuinely reform their processes, the governments that genuinely make it easier to do business, do away with regulations, encourage manufacturing, those are the countries which will succeed after COVID. People, for instance, will want to look at diversifying from China. Countries like Thailand, countries like Vietnam have already been doing very well. Indonesia, these are all in our immediate ASEAN region. Bangladesh also. So I think India has a great opportunity. We are the fourth largest manufacturer in Asia. We are the sixth largest manufacturer in the world. I think and we have scale as well. So I think if India really got its act together, and I think if the center, state governments worked together in a united, coordinated fashion, made land available, undisputed land available for industries that want to set up factories, production facilities, utilized our strengths, our demographics to our advantage, I see that India could become a shining light and a beacon of hope for the world, at least in terms of economic growth and manufacturing.
All right, Milind, please stay well and stay safe.